Right. Hello, everyone, and nice to see you all here. Thank you for attending. I just want to double check that you can all see my screens. If you can, if you just can. Okay, brilliant. Nice. That feels better. So today, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining me into this workshop, which I've titled Structuring Transformative Coaching Session for Success. My name is Laure. It's although it's written L-A-U-R-E, it's pronounced L-O-R. It's French originally. That's the reason, hence the tricky pronunciation. I am a coach, I am a supervisor, and I am a coach mentor, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here today and having this opportunity to share some of my views, let's say, around the structure and the importance that it may have within a session. Now, let's just tell you a little bit more about myself. So I trained with Animas back in 2014. I started being a mentor back in 2015, supporting coaches in training and also those who wanted to get ready for the credential process with ICF. For whether ACC or PCC level. And I also qualified as a supervisor with Animas Sister Center, which is the International Center for Coaching Supervision. So yeah, it's been a little while. It's been a few hundred of hours of me working with different coaches and with a variety of experience, some really in their training, some others more experienced and so on, which is in a sense what's bringing me here today with you, because I thought it might be interesting and hopefully useful as well to share with you what I have noticed over the years and the session in terms of challenges that my mentees might have encountered. And in fact, I'm going to share a slide with you of some of the things that I've heard over the years my mentees saying. So let's have a quick look. Some of these might resonate for some of you, some of them won't. But over the years, like I was saying, I've heard different things such as, I don't know what to ask. I don't want to force my client to have a goal. I work with what the client brings. That's the Animas way. I know what my client needs. I'm just going to tick boxes for the assessment process, right? So as I share this, perhaps some of you might have a smile coming up on your face, recognizing yourself in those statements. Some of you might be like, no, that's not me at all. And actually, the beauty of this is that there is no wrong or right. These are just things that I've heard over the years. And it's just recognizing the variety of what might be coming up for each one of us at different stages. Okay. Now, the reason I'm here today is to talk about a common denominator that I have noticed leading the mentees to some of those statements, okay? So the purpose of me being here today is that I would love to invite you to join me on reflecting around the impact of what having a structure or not having it may have on your session, okay? This is not for me to convince you to have a structure. It's more a space for me to invite you to consider different angles, reflect on them, perhaps discovering a new value of having a structure, what that might add to the session, Or maybe you'll be like, no, I'm good with what I am doing. And either way, that will be okay. So again, I'm just here going to share and going to share my understanding of the structure and the value that I consider it may bring. Now, some of you may wonder, so why do you care about this, right? Well, first of all, because I do love my job, my work as a mentor and a supervisor. I love being able to support my mentees and supervisors in finding solutions to their challenges. But most importantly, the reason that I really care about is that either way, you choose because that's what you want to do, not because somebody, and yes, it's written somebody as myself tell you so, or some of the bodies such as Animas or ICF say so. I really want you to notice what might be purposeful for you in having the structure, and for it to be because that's what you want to have. Again, not because someone says so. Now, the other thing that I do consider important, and one of the reasons I'm here, is because I actually have noticed over the years that about 94% of my mentees' challenges come down to the lack of structure. I will go into more details about that in a bit, but we will look at how having a structure or not having a structure might affect the remaining of the session. Okay. Lastly, the self-reflection aspect. I do believe, a little bit like I was just saying, I do believe that it's important we believe in what we are doing. We're not just doing it to tick boxes or just because. I think the self-reflection and the recognizing what we find useful and not is also what is going to help us keep developing as a person and as a professional. Now, before I dive into let's say the meat of this workshop, I don't want to bore you already with my own voice. So I'd like to pause, stop talking, and perhaps in a moment, invite you to join a breakout room and consider the following. Right now, at this moment of this conversation, how do you feel about structure? Maybe reflect again on some of the statements that I shared earlier in those bubbles. If any of them caught your attention, did you recognize yourself in one of those? Okay, so we'll give you about 5 minutes to go off into breakout rooms, or perhaps around 5 to 6 people, and maybe just have a quick chat. Now, be kind to yourself. There is no wrong or right answers. And yes, this is hurting my eyes as well. The right is wrongly spelled. But yeah, let's just have fun. This is, sorry. Yeah, it shouldn't have, it should have spelled differently, R-I-G-H-T. But you can't forget, we've seen this, can we? But going back to my questions and the purpose of these space, the breakout rooms, just reflect gently. There is no wrong or right. It's just to hear about what others are feeling right now around the structure, what we might see differently, each one of us. Be honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Like I was saying, and I know I am going to repeat myself about this. It's not about because someone says so. It really is about what you think. And let's just have fun today. Okay. I really want us to have fun exploring different aspects of the structure, the different benefits it might have, different impact. So for now, I'm going to wave goodbye for just 5 minutes. Off you go into a breakout rooms. By the way, maybe if you'd like to take a screenshot, just in case. But yeah, so how do you feel about structure right now? And which of the earlier statement might resonate with you. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to send you into breakout rooms. Ruth, whenever you're ready, please. All right. So I'm mindful because of 5 minute numbers and also time restriction. I'm not going to be able to invite each one of you to share your thoughts and reflections on this question. However, I'd like to perhaps invite you to type into the chat box. If you feel like sharing, I will definitely take the time to read some of those comments. And also, I'm going to take the time to perhaps take up to 3 people. So whoever is first in putting your hands up on the emoji, then I'll invite you to share your thoughts. Annette, I can see you've got your hands up. Hi.
Yes, I mean, I was just... when you're saying a structure in a session, it doesn't tend to be a structure in the session itself. I think the structure is sort of determined if your client, when you ask your client, is there anything in particular that you want to explore today? And they say, yes. I specialize in coaching people who've been bullied in the workplace, and they may want to talk about something that happened in the workplace in between coaching sessions, and wanting to know whether they, how they reacted and what they could have done better or different or whatever. That's just an example. But I think in some ways, I let things, I think the only structure I have is in the program that I've designed around the subject. But within the session itself, I sort of tend to allow to let things happen organically.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you, Annette. Thanks for sharing. Brilliant. Helen, you're next.
Hi. I feel quite conflicted about this, actually. I'm perhaps newer to coaching than many of you on the call. I'm still training, so I'm coming up to module 6. So, and I have been picked up on my goal setting during my supervision. My intuition, having just done a workshop on intuition, is I love the exploration and obviously letting the client lead where they want to go. And I can see that you do need a structure, but it feels sometimes that is strangling me. Whether or not it's strangling them, I don't know, but it feels like I'm really having to hold this goal in my head too much. So I'd be really keen to hear how others have got through that. To serve the client, but also to get through what I need to get through.
Yeah, nice, great. Thank you for sharing, Helen, and hopefully we'll touch on what you've just brought up. Roberto, ciao.
Hi. So as you know, and now I share with the other, I'm in the middle of the coaching course, so module 3, so very early, but reflecting on structure, I know maybe I'm going into specific, but I feel the importance of the structure is linked to the fact that we will not be always perfect in front of the client. We had a bad day or whatever, and at that point, what are you going to do? I feel that the structure will help me if I own it well enough. I can have a decent, let's say, session, or from me, not. Maybe the client will be extremely happy, but at least I can adjust with the help of the structure.
Yeah, nice, great, thank you. And Brinsley, we're going to take the last one. Yeah, go for it.
Hey, Laure. I've recently been listening to some of my recordings, and I noticed I don't really do much goal setting at the start. I'm a bit more open. And I've been reading Claire Pedrick's book recently about how the classic line of, I noticed we set the goal at the start of the session being this, but now we're talking about this, and how a client can feel kind of told off a bit. That can come up. And I notice that in sessions when I might name that. And I think it depends on the client sometimes and how we bring people on track. Because when I'm coaching young people, I prefer to keep it open because I think I want to give them the space to just explore. Whereas some clients might be happy with that question, and then they feel autonomous in the space to say, actually, no, this is not useful, or it is useful. So I think sometimes how we approach it can be dependent on context and the client.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you, Brinsley. I really am loving the variety of the comments that we are having, the different experiences as well, different contexts, depending on the type of client or the topics they may bring. So really hoping that you guys are already valuing the variety here, because one of the things that I consider being really important is precisely spaces like this one, where we hear about different people experiences, what they might do differently, and so on. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to read some of the comments, and then I'll dive into my thoughts or my perception of the structure. So a bit conflicted. I think when I started coaching, structure was something I craved as a safety net, but gradually I have become much more intuitive. I think it is something I hold loosely now. Nice, because you're noticing a change. Corporate goals are in the background of our coaching contract, but the win question, what's important now, drives the session. Yeah, nice. I try to think of it less as a structure and more as a container, with flexibility within. So far, if I'm honest, I would agree with everything that everyone is sharing. Again, I think it's looking at the different aspects and different experiences, different context. So I like that Hattie co-creating the container with psychological safety. Structure got me my qualification. There you go. Simplifying Coaching by Claire Pedrick. I also think of outcomes not only as tangible outcomes, like develop a toolkit to XYZ, but also less tangible ones to become clearer. Okay, let's ask the key question. What would we expect the coachee wants, require? Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop here because I can't read everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't have time. But I'm really loving, like I'm saying, the variety, because I would agree with a bit of everything, if I'm honest. So what I'd like to do, because I'm also noticing some concepts that are coming up that I intend to touch on. So I'm gonna invite you to go back to basic. Okay, so let's have a quick look, right? Look back and refresh ourselves around what are the parts that might create the structure. Okay, I'm gonna assume that most of us would more or less agree with the fact that there are three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Beginning being the part where we would connect with our client, confirm a topic for the conversation and a goal for it. Perhaps the middle would be more for us to discuss what might be going on, ask those questions, being curious, trying to understand what's the situation and what might we want to do about that situation and how might we put in place those different aspects. And then the end, where we bring our conversation to a close by taking the time to invite the client to share their takeaways and hopefully some accountability and potentially the next step might be. Now, part of me wants to say, well, that is all great, right? In theory, but in practice, just like some of you have shared, you don't necessarily hold a very, I'm going to say, strict structure like this one. Perhaps some of us might find that we skip certain bits, or that we don't necessarily get enough clarity on certain aspects, which lead us to feeling perhaps lost at times, or perhaps diving into some leading or compound questions, being a bit more directive. So to make it more, to make more sense of what I'm sharing right now, I am gonna share a couple of scenarios, okay? So let's imagine that we have a session, okay, where we don't have a specific goal for the session. Now, what might happen in those middle, in the middle of the session? Well, if you have no goal for the session, like for example, the client wants to talk about the weather, okay, that's great. Let's talk about the weather. So what's the weather like where you at? Oh, it's grayish or it's sunny and so on. Okay, and where is it like where you at? Well, you know, it's quite rainy today. Oh yeah, I was in Bahamas about a couple of years ago and it was so sunny this time of year and so on. Da, da, da. We could go on for an hour, right? But at the end is, what's the point of us having that discussion, right? So if I am not clear on what the goal happens, I might start feeling like, yeah, we're talking about the weather, but where are we going with this? I'm feeling a bit lost here. So what might happen? And by the way, I'm using might happen because I'm also mindful that this might not be the case for everyone, but perhaps we're going to feel the need for clarity. And we're not necessarily going to feel okay or confident enough to say, hey, client, can I just double check with you? What's the purpose of us discussing the weather, right? So instead, what we might fall into is like, okay, I need to understand where I'm going with this. So shall we look at the weather for next week, for example, right? So I am going to fall into being a bit more directive, into finding something for us to focus on. It could be as well that I'm like, oh, okay, so what are we talking about? Is the weather, are we talking the weather just so you can decide where you're going to go next on holiday, or how you might want to dress up when you go out this afternoon? Okay, I would then give them two options to choose from. For example, who would that come from? Well, that would come from me more than from the client. Another thing that I have noticed sometimes, and when those moments happen where we perhaps fall into compound directive, a bit of leading, that feeling lost, that sometimes on occasions, again, that is not to say this is the same for everyone, but one of the things that can happen is our lack of confidence. So, or more than lack of confidence, is like our confidence taking a hit and being like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at this. Perhaps this is not what I'm meant to do. I don't know anymore. And again, we might fall into the getting lost. Now, another thing that I'm wondering about is the end, right? Because towards the end, the end, like we were looking at earlier, is to make sense of, bring up some awareness as to what's happened since the beginning of the session towards the end. So yes, I could be talking to someone about the weather just randomly, and an hour later be like, hey, that was a nice chat. Thank you for that. See you next time. Why not? So we're not discussing value here. And I want to make these really clear, because there's always going to be value, really, because the client is coming to a space where it's all going to be about the client and what the client wants to share. However, how am I going to be able to double check a progress or acknowledge a change? Again, that is not to say the client might not say, oh, that was nice. That feels, it feels nice for some reason having shared that. But what specifically has changed? Right. So again, what has been the evolution? So for example, imagine that you hop on the car, right? And you're in London and you want to go to Brighton. And halfway through the journey, you just stop to refuel randomly somewhere. You don't know where you're at, but you knew about how many miles that there was between London and Brighton, right? If I stop randomly and all of a sudden I'm like, I wonder how much do I have left oh, but hold on, I didn't check what was my mileage before I started my car and started heading towards Brighton, right? So we wouldn't have that reference point to be like, oh, I've driven 40 miles or 60 miles or 70 miles. Therefore, there's also the other side. Perhaps we wouldn't be able to check how much there's left. So hopefully this example is making sense, okay? I'm going to pause here for a moment and just give a couple of minutes just to perhaps put our thoughts together. I might have a quick look at the chat briefly, and then I'll dive into a different scenario, okay? Let me see. So subconsciously, that is what I do during a coaching session. I also think that for some clients, an obvious structure is what lands with them, but for others, it might feel too contracting, limit their ability to reflect and open up. Yes. I would ask them, how is talking about the weather benefiting them? Yes, that would be an option. Defining a goal essentially puts the client in the driving seat. For anyone who was just in Hattie's workshop earlier, you're giving them the steering wheel of the bus. But if there's no goal, how do you know where you're going? Yeah. Driving bus with no destination map, or even being able to see through the windscreen. Okay, yeah. Who defines, sets the goals? Yeah, that's a great question. Let's dive into it, actually. So let's look at the next scenario. Let's look at what might happen when we do take the time to clarify a goal, right? As you can see, and this was mentioned by someone earlier, the goal from the beginning, I also have added tangible and non-tangible. These are concepts that I quite often hear from the mentees in terms of a tangible one could be, let's say, me wanting to lose 3 kilos in a month because I want to fit my dress that I bought for my friend's wedding, okay? But unfortunately, summer happened and I put on some weight, okay? So that would be quite tangible, right? Because we would make it quite clear about, yeah, I want to lose 3 kilos and so I can fit the dress for my friend's wedding. So we would have the specific. A non-tangible goal could be my client saying, I want to grow my confidence. And at that point, sometimes we can fall into, okay, so tell me, when was the last time you felt confidence? Well, here's an idea. How about before that, exploring perhaps what type of confidence, in what context? Because it could be, yeah, I want to get more confident about jumping in my car by myself and driving all the way down to Brighton. Or it could be instead saying, yeah, I want to grow my confidence so I can deliver a speech in front of 3,000 people. Okay, so we would already look at, all right, what type of confidence? We're getting a bit more details. What would be the purpose as well? So if it is about me wanting to deliver a speech, there's a purpose, there's an intention, then I might go into, okay, so what's important to you about these and so on. So it would support the client to have a clearer intention on what we might need to do or where we might want to head towards, what we might want to achieve. Perhaps it could be as well about a feeling or an action, okay? Now, by knowing the fact that I want to grow my confidence to jump into the car or deliver a speech, I do have that intention. I am going to be able to have that as a reference point, okay? Like a lighthouse almost. When we are, for example, going back to the one that I was mentioning earlier from London to Brighton, maybe it's about checking my mileage before I start the car so I can keep track of how much am I driving so far? How am I doing? Am I going to get on time to Brighton for the dinner I have with my friends? Or is it also a way for us to double check, actually, do I still want to go to Brighton? Because maybe I've changed my mind. Maybe I'm like, oh, hold on, I'm driving faster than I thought. That gives me a bit more time. I might go and stop by the beach before I go to that dinner. So again, is giving us those reference points that will give us the opportunity to double check the evolution, as well as, is this still what I want to do? Okay, so in a sense, what's going to happen? Well, that's going to help me remain present. If I'm clearer on towards what I'm heading, and also if I have a reference point, it's going to be easier for me to say, oh, hold on, but you said you wanted to go to Brighton for dinner, and now I'm hearing you want to stop by the beach. What's happening here, right? So having that reference point is precisely going to allow us to double check where we are at in relation to the initial moment. I know I'm using those examples, but it could be around confidence. Same thing. So confidence in what context? How would you rate currently your confidence? Where would you like it to be by the end of this conversation? So a bit more non-tangible, but actually by asking those questions, that might help me make it more tangible in a way, right? So what would be the result of this? Well, actually, towards the end, that might help me, right? Double check with my clients. So as we come towards the end of the session, what's changed, right? Because at that point, because I had that reference point, the client might be like, yeah, I recognize that actually I had plenty of time and I'm going to be able to stop by the beach first and relax, enjoy coffee and ice cream. So it's recognizing the needs. Perhaps maybe the person will realize, you know what, I actually don't fancy going all the way to Brighton for dinner with my friends. Maybe I would rather go to the beach and just be by myself. That could be as well. But we would have a reference point from the beginning that will allow us to see the progress, that will allow us to notice what has changed, probably the reason things have changed, and therefore having a more, I'm going to use tangible just for the sake of this conversation, a more tangible value. Okay, again, I'm not saying that in the previous case that wouldn't be valuable, but here we would be more specific. We would be able to say, yeah, that actually was great because I've realized I don't need to do this. This is what I want to do instead. Okay, and from there, it'll be easier to recognize as well the emotions that might have shifted, or perhaps as well what the client might want to put in place. Because actually, if I decide at the end, I don't want to go for dinner with my friends in Brighton, I'd rather go to the beach. Well, what needs to happen? Let's revisit the map for the driving. Okay. Hopefully, this is helping and making sense. I'm just going to pause here for a couple of minutes and maybe have a quick look into the chat in case there are some comments. And in a moment, you will be sent into breakouts for about 15 minutes, okay, where you get the opportunity to discuss some different scenarios that I will be sharing in a moment. But just giving you a couple of minutes perhaps to reflect on what we've seen between and what differences we might have noticed between the scenarios where there might not be a clear goal defined and those who are more defined, whether it's tangible or non-tangible. And I will invite you during those breakouts to look at different scenarios and perhaps reflect on what you would do with it, how you might ask certain questions. I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat. it's good to talk about the goal if there is one. Sometimes the client needs clarification themselves. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes I struggle to help the client get to a goal which is small enough for the session. Maybe I know we are working on confidence and the type of confidence, but that is very big for a session. Often a client will come and not really know what specifically to work on. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the one example I would say around that one, because you're absolutely right, sometimes the goal, the client themselves don't know necessarily what they want. And thinking about the reference point, okay, so the client comes and imagine the client says, I know I'm here, but I don't know what I want. So that could be one of those scenarios worth having an exploration. So actually, I'm gonna leave it here and invite you to go into 15 minutes breakout. Have a think about this precise example. I think this is aligned to what Kim just mentioned. I'm here, but I don't know what I want. So based on what we discussed, particularly on this one, defining a goal, what type of questions might you be tempted to ask your client? Okay. Same with if the client comes in crying. So let's look at, so I might not define a goal. Okay, let's just go with whatever. But if you were to define a goal, what type of questions might you ask? Okay. We are going to go off into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes. So have perhaps a screenshot of these and of the scenarios. And we will see you in about 15 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Nice to see you all again. So what I'd like to do, again, because of time restriction and numbers, I can't invite everyone. I'd love to, trust me. And those of you who know me know how much I'm all in for a conversation, never-ending conversation. However, here I have to manage my time. So I'm going to do something similar to earlier. Anyone who would like to share some thoughts or thoughts, reflections that came up in the breakout room as you were having a look and discussing the different scenarios, then feel free to either type on the chat, or I'll take about up to 5 people that might want to put your hands up and I'll bring you in. If that's something that you want to do, of course, not going to force anyone. If not, I'll go sharing some thoughts around the different scenarios, how we might go by it, just sharing my own thoughts, really. Okay. Anyone that would like to? Craig, go for it.
Hi, thanks, Laure. Jump in. For me, it's structuring is definitely something that I feel like I've kind of struggled with a bit in the past, and just what's coming up for me is that, you know, the kind of the structure and the contracting is not just there as a direct link to the results. It's just something to kind of accompany us on the way, and for me, I think to kind of help have something to kind of, you know, when we do get lost or when we feel like we're just having a chat, almost something that just allows us to kind of, you know, bring some focus back to the session and check in and say, you know, we talked about this, you know, are we going in the right direction still, or do you want to go over here, because that seems to be where we're going? And it's just that tool then that allows you to at least kind of keep some kind of a focus in the session without leading it as such. Nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, great. Kirk.
Thanks, Laura. What came up in our small group, very interesting, when the client comes to meet us, there's so much they're processing or not processed. A lot of as someone says, lots of little monkeys in our heads.
Yes,
We all have it.
absolutely.
What they call the self-talk, the jargon we use. But it's people bring that into when you're sitting with a person, and it's something about just being present. Giving the person space, whatever whatever that means. Take some time just to be for a couple of minutes, and give them time to breathe,
Yeah.
because they could be so stressed because life gets in the way.
Mm.
They could have been coming from leaving their kids somewhere, rushing to get to the session. Who knows? So they're so unpresent to themselves. And we just looked at the third one. I'm here, but I don't know what I want. And it's not it's just being with whatever's there before, rather than saying I have to get an objective or I have to get a goal set. Letting them bring themselves, and the deeper stuff will emerge, because once that's clear that we all have that kind of mental clutter, which I call, for want of a better word, but we need to listen to that, and sometimes the noise is too much. So just allowing a bit of breathing space, and if someone is very hands-on, to give them a bit of paper or flip, something. Some would be more kind of kinesthetic, rather than they listen, or they or visual, I don't know, but it's finding ways just to bring them to themselves, and that's what came up in our.
Yeah, nice, great stuff. Thank you, Kirk. Hattie.
We were sort of talking about obviously all of the questions, but we had an interesting conversation about the crying one. I think with emotion and tears, it's easy to sort of almost treat it as something different, that goes beyond the coaching relationship rules. But actually, I think it's quite important to remember that everyone is different. We all have our own paradigm. We all have our own responses and ways of dealing with things and our own needs. And actually asking the client what they need in that situation, how they would like to use the space and the time, rather than wanting to, and I say this as someone who is guilty of this, wanting to rescue them, wanting to put them back together, wanting to tell them nice things. Oh, I think you're great. That stuff less helpful, but actually allowing them to continue to drive and offering options, obviously. Would you like a timeout? Do you want to come back in 10 minutes? But offering them, not sort of trying to sort of, make it all go away.
Yeah, nice, great. Thank you, Hattie. Anyone else? I think I saw a hand up. Yeah, go on, Roberto.
Maybe just one observation. I don't have, actually, I would love to hear how to manage a crying situation. The only observation I made also during the catch up now is that we don't know why a person is crying. Can be many reasons. So that's the one that I think I would start mentally. I don't know why the person in front of me is crying. At that point, probably some question will come out, but I'm stuck there.
Yeah, nice, great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I really am appreciating the variety of reflection. I'm just going to have a quick look. We are all ears to learn how to manage the crying situation. Okay, I'll share some thoughts on that in a moment. As I said before, I would ask anyone seeking a coach to talk about what possible benefits they would get from that. Yes, going to Edinburgh to be at friend's wedding. There are so many different topics that could be explored. Clients paying a coach usually know what they want to explore. Is the practice client who may not know anything about coaching, may not know what they want to talk about specifically. Client that comes in crying, hold space for them and have a cry and allow them to calm down. Yeah, these are great options. Everything is valid. And I want to acknowledge all of the different reflections we've heard. I'm just going to share a few points from my perspective. Okay, now I want to make this clear. That is not to say this is how it should be done. This is just me sort of brainstorming out loud, if you'd like, and then take it or leave it. Okay, I think I'm gonna park the one about talking about the weather, because I think that one I covered somehow. I sort of gave it away prior to sending you into the breakout room. I want to go to the Edinburgh for my friend's wedding. It's similar to the one I was discussing around going to Brighton, isn't it? So here we have perhaps I want to talk about the weather. That's general. Doesn't sound like there is a clear goal. It's just we have the topic though. Okay, so I want to talk about the weather. This is where I'm going to go with, okay, like it's been said in the chat. So what is it that you would benefit from talking about the weather? What is it that you'd like to get from discussing the weather, right? We can start with that. What's important about talking about the weather? And from there's so many options that we don't know. The client could be, because I want to decide where I want to go on holiday next, or I want to find a way to prepare myself for the weather that's coming because it affects my mood, whatever it is. Okay, the other one, I want to go to Edinburgh for my friend's wedding. That's quite specific, isn't it? And sort of going back to the idea of tangible, non-tangible, that's quite tangible. I want to go to Edinburgh for my friend's wedding. Okay, so what is it you want to explore with this? How would we make these space useful to you in relation to your goal of wanting to get to Edinburgh for your friend's wedding? Okay, so I'm still going to explore what's important, what still is the purpose of it, what's your need from this situation, what's the reason you bring in these to the session? Because I find that sometimes we can fall directly into, yeah, you want to talk about the weather, like I was saying earlier. It's like, cool, what's the weather like where you're at? Or I want to go to Edinburgh for my friend's wedding. All right, so you're going to go by plane. Are you going to buy the plane ticket? I'm assuming here. So let's be curious right from the beginning. What's your need behind bringing that? The client says, I'm here, but I don't know what I want. In this case, for me, the main difference is with the other ones. We are here and we know we want to go into this direction. We're moving forward. I want to talk about the weather. I want to go to Edinburgh. Okay. I'm here, but I don't know what I want. I'm like, yeah, I'm here, but I don't know if I'm going to go this way, that other way, or if I'm going to go backwards. So maybe one of the questions could be to explore, okay, and what brought you here in the first place? What might be your expectations from our space here in relation to that? Because even if the client doesn't know what they want to get to, where they want to get to, what they want specifically, we can still explore what's brought you here. What is it? What's your hope from this space? Well, you know, maybe if I can just talk out loud and see what comes up. There you go. There may not be a specific goal yet, but allow me to speak up and see what comes up. So that could be one of the options. They can come up with more options. But my point being, I'm here. I'm not clear on where I'm going, but something brought me here. So what brought you here? Well, maybe the hope that someone will listen to me. Maybe the hope that over the different session, I will get some clarity around what I want. That still is a goal, if you think about it, isn't it? Because it's like, oh yeah, I'm hoping this space will help me getting a clear understanding of what I want. Okay. Hopefully this is making sense. I'm going to move on to the client. Comes in crying. I might just hold the space for a while. I might just be like, okay, I can see some tears. I can see some emotions. I don't know what type of emotions that might be, but I can see the emotions because I can see tears. One thing I'm not going to do, though, is, whoa, I can see you're upset today. What's going on? Because that might not land quite well with the client, might not necessarily help with the rapport, right? I'm going to avoid assumptions. I'm not going to go like, oh, you're crying. I can see that something's really upsetted you. Or I can see you're really, really sad today. That's judgment. That's me making an assumption around what might be going on for my client. So what might I do? I'm just going to wait for my client. Okay, I can see some things going on today. Some emotions are present. I'm just going to wait for you to tell me when you're ready. I'm just going to wait for you to tell me how can I help you today? How can we best use the space today to support you? Okay. Now, the client coming crying doesn't mean that we are not going to be able to get somewhere at some point. The other thing is saying here is like, right now, we're not clear yet on what we want to use the space for. Okay. Maybe the client is actually excited, by the way. Maybe the client is like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I just got my diploma with animals and I've been waiting for this for so long. Okay. So it could be tears of happiness. I'm seeing some smile. So this looks like it might resonate somewhere, but hopefully I'm making my point here. Like, let's stay away from assumption. Let's take the time, okay? It's not necessarily about what's the goal. Maybe it's just what's the need. The need at the end of the day can become a goal as well. Maybe my need is just to speak up, okay? And what is it that would give you if you could just speak out loud for a while? I would feel heard. And this is what I need right now. Okay. And what is it that you want to be heard about? This is what's happening right now in my life. And there's this and there's that. And I'm feeling like no one's listening to me. Okay. All right. And what's important to you about feeling heard? What am I doing? I'm just still exploring. That may go on for 20, 30 minutes. It doesn't matter. We're still going to get somewhere into a purpose, an intention. Okay. So it may not be a goal as to, hey, I need to lose 3 kilos within a month for my wedding friends. By the way, I don't have a friend getting married in a month. Okay. I don't need to fit into a dress or anything. But my point being, sometimes the goal is not necessarily something what we would refer to as tangible in terms of, very specific, like 3 kilos and so on. It may not be like that at the beginning, but I may come up with an intention by clarifying the need. Maybe the client is coming crying because the client is feeling really sad. Okay, so what is it you'd like to do about that? Do you know what? I want to find a way to not feeling sad about this that's happening right now. That still is a goal. Okay. So where am I going with this? A few things actually is sometimes the goal, we can have a perception of the goal, an idea of what a goal needs to be. My invitation would be, well, do we need to call it a goal in a sense? Maybe it's just about being clear on which direction we're heading towards. What might be the need? What might be the change of the feeling? At the end of the day, what am I aiming for? What's my intention for the session? What's the outcome that I am seeking? Okay, so if you think about it, all of these are still goals, but maybe by changing the name, it resonates more with us, but we're still going towards an aim, a target, okay? Hopefully this is making sense. I'm doing a lot of talking, so hopefully I'm not boring you. Coming towards the end, this is what I'd like to leave you with, okay? After this conversation, let's take a couple of minutes. What would you say you're taking away from this conversation? Again, unfortunately, look, I absolutely love this conversation. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could hear all your voices one by one. Unfortunately, that's not possible today. So feel free to type in the chat if you'd like to share. So what would you say you're taking away from this conversation? If you were to change one thing from your session on how you use the space, whether the structure was present or not, what might you do? Okay, what might that be? That's one change you might do. And at the beginning of this conversation, I did ask you, how do you feel about structure? And you don't have to share these. These, by the way, these are reflective questions. It's more for you to notice what has changed. Maybe initially I was like, structure, no way, I don't need it. I was looking at, maybe we're looking at it like an enemy, right? Like, oh, I have to, it's imposed on me. So how do you feel right now? Are you perhaps getting a different point of view around it? Are you having a feeling perhaps a bit more open? Maybe like, oh, I was doing that already. So perhaps it's just about, yeah, it's nice to confirm something similar, okay? There you go. I realized that I have a structure to my sessions. Nice. This is a very good point, because sometimes, and this is another thing that I notice in the sessions with the mentees, they're like, oh, I think I'm doing this wrong and this, and I have to work on that. And actually we start listening to those recordings and we're like, maybe we are being a bit too harsh on ourselves. And maybe we are already doing certain things the way we are supposed to do. Okay. Now, just as we close, and by the way, if you wish to have the slides, you'll get the opportunity. I'll go into that in a moment. Okay, so not to worry about that. Let me see. Okay, takeaway: time spent at the beginning to establish intention is key. Being aware of how the language of goal setting will vary from person to person. Absolutely, we need to be adaptable as well with who we might have in front of us, who the client might be. I feel more confident about various scenarios following this workshop. I will use the what's important to you about this more. I still feel structure is important and that I hold it lightly. Yes, I think, that's a bit what I was trying to share in a sense when I was talking about, maybe it's not the word goal, maybe it's more about intention. So let's look as well the wording that we use, how that might impact us. Okay. Now, very briefly, and I have literally 4 minutes, and I am doing my best to demonstrate good time management today. So initially, we were talking about beginning, middle, and end. This is how I like to name the different parts of my sessions. It's the purpose, the intention, what I was sharing with you, like defining that reference point, okay? Towards what am I aiming at, and so on. Then the exploration. So for me, it's the exploration as well as checking the motivation behind what they want to do. And from there, what's the situation, what's happening, what needs to happen. And definitely important, it's not just an end, is the awareness. What's making these valuable to you specifically? What has shifted? What has changed? What have you learned based on our conversation today? Okay. So hopefully, like I was saying, this is making sense. I just want to share with you my structure for success, or what I like to refer to as PPEA, purpose, exploration, and awareness. Okay, it's like we're here. That doesn't mean it needs to happen within the first 2 minutes of the session. And hopefully this came across when I was sharing my views on how I might manage a situation where my client is crying. I might hold the space a bit longer, and maybe 10-15 minutes in, be like, okay, how can we make this time useful to you? What is it you'd like to get from it? What are we aiming for? What is your, the purpose for this? Then the exploration and the awareness. Now, how have I demonstrated this today? Well, at the very beginning of this chat, I did share why I was here, what was important to me to share with you. Then I went on to exploring. I also mentioned that I wasn't here to tell you what to do, but more of an invitation, right? Then I went on to sharing different scenarios, the goal, the no goal, and then those different 4 aspects, which hopefully you got the opportunity to explore in those breakout rooms. And finally, I just asked you about the awareness with these questions, okay? What are you taking from our conversation? What might you do differently moving forward? And how do you feel now about what you mentioned at the beginning, okay? 4 main tips. I could give you 20, but I'm going for 4 only. Number 1, sometimes let's look at the structure as a friend, not a foe, and let it flow. So someone was mentioning about the flexibility around it. Absolutely. It's not about, oh, within the first 5 minutes, I need to do this, within the first other 15, that, and so on. Let it flow, okay? Take the time to define an aim for the session, all right? Again, I'm not going to repeat myself. I don't want to bore you, but you know what I mean by that. When in doubt, ask your client. So if I'm feeling like, I'm not sure where we're going with this, then I might ask my client, okay, so now that we're here at this point of the session, what is it you'd like to get from this? Okay, it's okay, even if it's halfway through the session. Precisely, that was the point of having a reference point, okay? And finally, be honest with yourself on where your contribution is coming from, okay? If I fall into leading, where's that leading coming from? Is it because I am unclear? Is it because I think I know what my client wants? What might that be, okay? This is an invitation for self-reflection. Thank you so much for being here. Unfortunately, I have to bring this call to an end. If you enjoyed this, or if you this workshop, if you'd like to hear a bit more about some of my tips, if you'd like to get the slides as well, just go into my website, add your email address. It will get sent to you as soon as I fix those typos. Terrible. Apologies for that. It still hurts my own eyes. And yes, I absolutely love the conversation. So I'm also mindful that sometimes things come up after a couple of days or 3. So you're more than welcome to get in touch. Drop me an email if there is some kind of realization or reflections that you'd like to share, okay? Thank you so very much for being here. Have a lovely rest of your day. Enjoy the remaining of the summit and hopefully see some of you very soon. Bye-bye, everyone.